Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 93 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In the last episode, we finished up taking care of stone processing, and now we need to get into handling acid. And first thing you might notice is I spent some time electrifying and brightening up some of these bus areas here. So my goal is to have the entire factory lit at night, at least all of the belts, like all of the machines have been lit. So anytime you've seen darkness out here, there's really nothing here. There's no machines, but you are missing out on some of the belts, and I know that can be kind of annoying. So I've been slowly electrifying the base, and I didn't really want to do it like this, just because I use these as like little highways to drive through, and it's kind of annoying when you have a bunch of power poles everywhere, but this isn't too bad. It's a minefield of power poles, to be sure. But it is passable with a little bit of effort, but now you'll be able to see that at night. I'm still working on a lot of the base, so it takes forever to change all this over, so I only wanted to spend so long before I got tired of it. So I still need to work on some areas here, but the whole eastern area here should be basically done, where I ran lots of nice power poles all around. Looks like I have some kind of leftover poles just kind of sitting there not doing anything anymore, but I tried to follow any belts that were there, so now you should be able to see what's going on at any given time, even if the belts are blank, but at least there's light. And especially this area here is real important to be lit. Didn't really take that many power poles to do it either, so... And I wouldn't drive through there, so that's not much of a problem. But I basically can't zoom out enough to show. At this point, basically, if it's not lit, it's because it's concrete. Is kind of my goal, so... Hopefully, that's a little more watchable than before. Another thing I noticed is that we're really getting overloaded with magazines here. We're almost up to our 4th chest full of them. And basically, this was a nickel dump, just to get rid of nickel because we were getting overloaded on it. But unfortunately, like, I don't see how we're ever going to use that much ammo, and I don't want to keep wasting it. And it occurred to me that perhaps it would be better to be dumping it into Invar. Now, we're not using Invar for anything, but eventually we will. So all of this will come in handy. And in that time, it's filled up half of this warehouse while I was placing lights full of Invar. And it doesn't really consume nickel all that fast. And as you can see, the base is running at full speed, just trying to keep up with the steel here. And I think we're going to eventually have a problem where we overload. Yeah, we have 40,000 copper, so we're not that far away from overloading on copper. So we'll probably need to do some research to clear it up. But it's very slowly been trying to get rid of this nickel. I think the set point is 10,000. So it's got a ways to go to clear that out again. But that just kept clogging up and needed to be fixed. But hopefully all of this stuff will only be working for so much longer. One thing, though, is that we are definitely running low on rubite ore. Where after not doing some research, the base caught up and also shut down production of batteries, which helped. But because we don't have any acid here, it's just this is going so slow now. It looks like it's actually just caught up, filling up the train station, so now it's very slowly catching up. But we ran out of our acid complement, and I removed the nitric acid little setup there, so we need to rebuild that. But that's the next thing on our list of stuff to do anyway, is to make all of the different acids. Before we get into that, though, is probably one more thing I'd like to mention is one more source of stone. That you can actually generate stone if you want to. So we go to geode here. It looks like we already have it researched with washing too. But you can actually wash for geodes from heavy mud water, and it's basically the other thing you can get from washing, besides sand, mud, and clay, and that sort of thing. So you never completely run out of geodes if you need to create some, but I prefer to have a closed loop system where we don't need to do this. So we'll just have to see how this existing setup works, and if it doesn't work, then we can build a geode producing setup with, it's fairly simple. It's just a bunch of washing plants, really. I'm just worried that the scale of washing plants we're going to need is going to be too much. See, why is that getting researched? Don't want to do that. Well, it's partially researched anyway, but whatever. I think we're pretty good on research. We don't really need to do much, but actually, well, it might be worth starting it up just to clear out some of that copper, so let's get that going. So we'll save the geodes for later. I don't want to build something if we don't have to do it, so we'll see if it's necessary or not. So let's drive out of here for a second. Gotta carefully dodge all of the poles. So a lot of these slurry setups aren't set up yet, but that's because we're waiting on that sulfuric acid. So what acids do we need to make? Well, we certainly need sulfuric acid again, which we already have the technology to do. And our source is basically to take that sulfur from washing the geodes, and we can turn that into sulfur dioxide gas, and that gas is a byproduct of other things, and we can turn those into sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is used in a lot of things, but it's also used for a lot of mining. It's used for sapphire, infinite sapphire mining, infinite stereotype mining, and infinite bobmonium mining. So that's definitely, we have a lot of uses for that. Of course, we need it for batteries and all that sort of thing. And also the same research also unlocked the ability to make hydrofluoric acid as well, which we can take some fluorite, which is another item we're getting from our chunk washing. Mix that with sulfuric acid and we can get calcium sulfate in our hydrofluoric acid. It looks like we could break down the hydrofluoric acid into the gas and wastewater if we wanted to. Looks like the research keeps going here. Is it going to unlock a better form of hydrogen fluoride? It looks like. Because the previous one we have to mix in with sulfuric acid, which, based on the other acid types, it's a less efficient way of making acid compared to doing it directly. So with this way, we need hydrogen fluoride gas and purified water to make the acid. And we can get rid of acid gas if we needed to. That's a result of processing oil. We don't have any of that. And also, I guess we can take hydrogen sulfide gas and turn it into sulfur if we needed to. But let's see, can we make hydrogen fluoride gas? I'm pretty sure we can. Looks like that's the only way. Where we make hydrofluoric acid and then make the gas. But then does that gas go into anything? Kind of. But some of this stuff is fairly complicated, and we don't have the research for it right now. Maybe if we are cracking the acid gas, we would get some hydrogen fluoride gas, which we can then dissolve into acid. But it looks like in this situation, we're going to be forced to do it the inefficient method and just add it to sulfuric acid. And then I believe calcium sulfate we can take care of. That was, we were doing that with making phosphorus, or phosphoric acid, I believe. Then we can make it back into sulfur dioxide gas and we'll get a lime out of it. So we definitely can do that. That said, it's probably worth just researching sulfur processing 3 here. We don't need it for anything. But it's kind of like the end of this chain, and then we'll get blue science to go beyond there. So it's probably worth just researching since we've already talked about it, just to get it out of the way. We'll need it eventually. Hydrofluoric acid goes into mining infinite givelite. And it has a couple of other uses here. Nothing we immediately need yet. But it does go into things. But since we need it for mining, we might as well take care of it, get it researched. Let's see, in nitric acid we were already handling before with our very temporary setup, so we just need to build that again. So we already covered all of that stuff, and it looks like we can't do nitrogen processing 3, so that's not a problem. And that will go into rubite. Goes into explosives, fertilizer. Some other stuff. Nothing we need yet, but it's part of what we're doing here is we're preparing all of the S's we're going to eventually need, so we might as well get it ready now and then send it where it needs to go later. But we do have an immediate need for it in the sense that we need to mine with it, so it'll have somewhere to go. And we need to make hydrochloric acid as well, which we already have researched. I believe we needed to make hydrogen chloride gas for processing silicon in a more efficient way, but it's just taking that one step further by adding purified water and we get acid out of it. And this actually doesn't require any water byproducts at all. Let's see if the next tier of chlorine processing is worth anything. Let's see, we can make some more gases there. Glycerol liquid and calcium chloride. We don't have an immediate need for any of these, but we'll just research it now so it's ready to go for when we need it. The last acid type is phosphoric acid. It looks like we already have the methods researched. It doesn't go into very much. It's a Mad Clown's thing that basically goes into making fertilizer. So we haven't really been using much of it. She has very few ingredients, essentially, besides making these crystals, and it probably goes into some of the infinite mining for Mad Clowns, but it's probably just for fertilizer, and fertilizer has other ways of being made. We don't have to make it this way. For example, we can make it with urea gas, or nitric acid, ammonia gas, and urea gas. So it's not a strictly necessary thing. And this differs from the other acid mining because hydrochloric acid goes into critidium mining, and then the other acids go into the other Angel's infinite ores. But phosphoric acid we actually don't have an immediate need for, so I don't see the need to build a big setup when we really have no idea how much of it we're going to need. Now I did build this, but this is very straightforward, easy to do, and then the ore doesn't have to go anywhere because we're not using it for anything. So I just kind of plopped that down just cuz. So I don't really think we should be building a giant setup handling phosphoric acid. We don't even really know how much of it we're going to need. And that covers most of our outputs here. Where we have sulfur, makes our sulfuric acid, sodium nitrate, which makes our nitric acid, fluorite, which makes our hydrofluoric acid, and then we can make the hydrochloric acid just with chlorine. Then the only thing it leaves is salt left over, or sodium chloride. And that's an interesting thing, because it doesn't really go into very much, and it's nothing we can really do right now. We can electrolyze the salt into sodium. We can make hydrochloric acid by mixing it with sulfuric acid. Or, interestingly enough, we can make saline water by just mixing it with purified water. I mean, that's what saline water is salt water, so we can make it disappear that way. But unfortunately, all of this stuff is not available. And it kind of looks like this is all blue science locked, basically. So this is a byproduct that we have nothing that we can do with it. So it's just going to have to, unfortunately, collect somewhere until we can find a use for it. It is what it is. Let's change the order of this stuff and get those acids researched. I don't think we need them immediately, but let's just get them researched. Alright, well, let's use Hellmod here and try to calculate how much of this we're going to need. We might as well calculate the full output of the factory, because that's the maximum acid we ever could produce, so we might as well just set it up for that. And we can kind of roughly figure this out, how much we're going to have, because each line creates 7.5 of its associated item here. So let's count all the sulfurs. So we have sapphirite, stearite, and bobmonium. So 7.5 times 3 is 22.5 for our sulfur. That's how much we need to be able to produce per second, and we'll have it from other sources, but for now, let's just worry about processing it right here next to all of these setups here. But since sulfur comes from so many sources, we might want to overbuild that part, but we'll see how big it is and go from there. 1 for fluoric, 1 for chloric, and 1 for nitric. So the chloric is going to produce the salt. But fluoric and nitric are there, but those are just 1 each. That's 7.5 in total. So now we have an idea of how much we have to work with here. So let's make each acid. And actually, since making hydrofluoric acid creates some calcium sulfate, that will turn into more sulfuric acid. So to figure out how this whole setup works, we probably need to take this into account. So let's do sulfur last. So we'll do hydrofluoric acid synthesis. Right there. Then we'll set it by input. And we know at maximum we're going to have 7.5 fluorite ores. Which is actually pretty small in the sense it only needs 2 chemical plants to handle all of that, which is a little surprising. So that creates the acid that we need. And then let's take this calcium sulfate. You add water to that inside a liquefier to make lime and then sulfur dioxide gas. And that's the byproduct we need to handle later, so we'll just leave that. Then let's do nitric acid. We have our 2 different sources, but we determined previously that we'll get a lot more nitric acid out of it if we do it the more efficient way through nitrogen dioxide gas. So we'll hit that. So nitrogen dioxide gas goes in, which comes from sodium nitrate. We'll set that to 7.5. And then we need to get this set up correctly because we have some monoxide gas here. Which we also need to turn into nitric acid. And it looks like this is set up correctly. Because our input is sodium nitrate, the oxygen gas, some compressed air. Then the output is nitric acid, so it should all be good there. Then about 2 machines for each stage, which is pretty good. Let's see, to do the compressed air, we have to put this on the bottom, right, for it to show it properly? You could probably just do it out here. 2.7. I think we have air filter too, don't we? So we need 1.4. Yes, we do. Okay, that's nitric acid taken care of, and we'll get 90 acid a second. Let's do chloric acid, which is kind of random because we can make however much of it we want to, but it looks like we are producing about 75, 90-ish acid of those two, so let's just match that and make about that much of the hydrochloric acid as well. So let's do hydrochloric output. Let's just say 75 and see what it looks like. Then the ingredient is hydrogen chloride gas, which is made out of hydrogen and chlorine. And then we need to make that chlorine through saltwater electrolysis. Just looking pretty good. And it's going to create an output of hydrogen gas, and that's okay because we can burn it. And it will create some sodium hydroxide as well. And I believe we have electrolyzer 2 now at this point. We should have the level 2s of just about all those things. Yes. This should work pretty well. Because if we have these machines set to 2, it'll go a little bit faster than 75. So that seems fine to me. All these setups are pretty small, so they should be pretty easy to upgrade in scope. And now we need to do our sulfuric acid. Although, we probably want to, since we already have some gas as an output right here, we probably want to make some more. So we'll go here, do our ingredient input of 22.5. Whew. Wow. Okay then. That's a lot more. I wonder if, do we have chemical plant 2? Not yet. Well, that is certainly going to be a bit of an output. We'll go with that. I mean, we do use acid for a lot of things. That probably won't need anywhere close to that much, but we'll see what that actually turns into. So that gas gets added to the other gas, the tiny bit of gas of an output from hydrofluoric acid. And now we have our output of sulfur dioxide gas, which we can go back in here and make the acid from. Set it to input, and link it. 925 acid per second. That seems like an awful lot because we need 42 for our batteries, and I can't imagine we need anywhere close to that for using that sulfuric acid to mine the infinite ores. So that definitely seems a little overkill. I'm fine with that. Let's just build it as is because it matches, and really it's still not that many machines. These machines are very small, so we'll be able to build that in a fairly compact space. But it's not that important that we use every last little bit of sulfur that we can, because each one of these has a backup measure installed where there is a buffer tank to absorb the wastewater output. They're just pushing everything they have onto the belts here, and then they go in here. However, we can control this by having a warehouse for each item type, and then send a control wire back and attach those to the inserters. So when the warehouse gets full, because these are shared belts, they're not independent belts for each thing. When the warehouse gets full, we can tell these to stop inserting things onto the belts to stop clogging it. And they'll hold 200 of each of their acid types, but then when they do, this tank is going to fill up, and it's going to get overloaded. And we have an overflow valve, or it's just going to get dumped into the clarifiers, and it's going to disappear. So we're not going to be overloaded. And we definitely want these acids, but it's not super critical that we use every last bit of acid. So it's okay to throw away the wastewater if we don't need it for something. That is quite all right. Okay, and then those are the 4 acid types: hydrofluoric, nitric, hydrochloric, and sulfuric. And some other outputs. Lime and sodium hydroxide, we can move those around as necessary. But now we have some shared inputs for all of these acids. There is saline water, but we have saline water as a byproduct of a lot of different sources. Plus, we do have a saline water generator down here just in case we run out, so hopefully that would be enough. We'll just have to see how it runs, and if it's good enough. Once the base gets fairly complicated like this, it's almost impossible to determine, take everything into account and find out, does the base have enough for this, and actually math it out. It's, at some point, you just have to be like, I think it's good enough. We've got a system in place. Let's just see if the system works. And if the system doesn't work, well, then we know exactly where to go. We'll know, this isn't big enough, let's make more. We don't need to make it perfectly balanced at this point, because there's too much that's interconnected for that to really be feasible. And those are the inputs we manually put in, so we know we have all of that. So we need a whole bunch of oxygen gas and a whole bunch of purified water. Well, making oxygen gas requires purified water because we have 2 options. We can do it with purified water or regular water and produce a slag. So let's see, is there an efficiency difference? There does seem to be. So if you look here, it's a 2-second craft time, uses the electrolyzer and the electrode. It produces a slag, and we get 30 oxygen and 40 hydrogen. We can do fast purifier, which needs purified water to begin with, but then it will produce 40 oxygen and 60 hydrogen. So it produces a little more oxygen and quite a bit more hydrogen. I guess the question is, do we want to dump a bunch of slag into the system or not? And also electricity use. Unfortunately, this is 75% efficient as far as making oxygen, but this is only 66% efficient, so it actually reduces the efficiency of making oxygen by doing it with purified water, unfortunately. I'm concerned about the amount of electricity all of that's going to take, but it's really not saving us that much to get rid of the slag, and the slag does have its uses. So we'll do it with dirty water. So we'll click there. I suppose another option is to do air separation as well. Then we'll be just dumping nitrogen back into the atmosphere. Not that that hurts anything. It is just nitrogen. Wonder what that is as far as energy efficiency. Oh, I like how the air filter actually consumes pollution rather than create it. That seems a little broken, to where the electrolyzer uses a lot of power and the air filter uses not very much. Well, we probably do want to be producing hydrogen because we do have a use for it now in making this methanol from extra carbon dioxide. And I don't know how, like from a realism standpoint, what's the more efficient way of getting oxygen? Is it to electrolyze water, which does require a lot of power, or sending it through an air quotes air filter, which it's not as simple as just passing it through a paper filter and then you get oxygen, where you'd have to freeze the air down into its liquid state to where the oxygen turned into liquid, but the hydrogen stayed as a gas, and that's how you would separate them, which sounds very energy intensive. I don't know if it's less energy intensive than an electrolyzer. They both sound pretty bad as far as energy efficiency, so I think I'm going to stick with electrolyzing. And actually, this setup looks like it's already built. It might take a little bit of work to turn this into a bigger pattern, but it's basically set up already. So we'll be able to kind of copy bits of this and expand upon it. So hopefully we'll be able to do that with a lot less work than it took to originally build this. Especially because it's fairly well optimized as far as how squished in there it is. So how many electrolyzers is that going to be? $64. Okay. 23 megawatts. All right. Well, I don't think we're ever going to need this much, but also we need this oxygen for other things on our base too, such as processing iron and copper and whatnot. So we will have other sources, and this setup may need to be expanded if we need even more oxygen than this. So it's okay if this is oversized and we won't ever really use much of it for sulfur because it will have other uses. So this is okay really to be big. It kind of needs to be. That will be a couple of pumps worth of water. Exactly how many is that going to be? I think it's, isn't it like hidden? And then we have to kind of come through here and hit that. There we go. Yeah, well, that's exactly 4 pumps. So we might be able to make some kind of pattern out of that since those divide into each other. And we need the electrodes to be cleaned. And we'll generate some mineralized water while we do it, which is never a bad thing. That's going to require a ton of purified water. It's actually also going to produce regular water, which is going to reduce the amount of pumps that we need to supply this. So we can get rid of that pump there. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize it was a perfect loop here, where it's 4,800 water goes in, which we electrolyze the electrodes with, and then cleaning the electrodes from purified water will create 4,800 water again. So we actually don't need to pump water directly into that setup. The only thing we need to create is our 6,820 purified water. That's definitely going to require a couple sets of pipes here to have a nice throughput. To make that from... that's going to generate a ton of saline water as well. But finally, 45 hydro plants. Let's get that set up again. I think we're good. We have the 3 acid inputs and the electrodes, but those will be reused on the setup, so that's really nothing. And then that's all the inputs. And the outputs are going to be our acids, and then some byproducts like lime, sodium hydroxide, a ton of hydrogen, which is to be expected, a ton of slag, which is to be expected. Those electrodes they should be getting clean, so I'm not sure why they're not showing up properly here. Oh yeah, this is... I think it's linking to the wrong thing here. Yeah, it actually, that's why the water matched, just because it was, it latched the electrodes together. So we want this to be 48. Okay, that's better. So that requires 4,800 water. But washing the electrodes is only going to produce 1920 water. That makes a little more sense. But also the hydro plants make more sense, where it's not quite as many as it was before. So that setup got a little smaller. And now we're down to just the amount of water that we need to put in there. So let's set that up again to make sure it's all good. There we go. Inputs look good. Let's double check our work again. Got the acids, some of the byproducts, and that slag. And then there we go. Mineralized water and saline water. So it's looking pretty good. Most of the setup looks alright. The oxygen generation looks insane, but I know we're going to need that oxygen for several things beyond just making acid, so I think that is acceptable. And that's the end of this episode. Now that we have all of the hell mod planning done for acid, we can go about building the setup. But that's going to be on the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.